Today I'm going to demonstrate for you a Christmas wreath. Today, instead of doing the traditional moss style, I'm actually going to use an Oasis base. This one's actually got a plastic back to it. Something I would recommend using, especially if you're putting it onto a table. The foam backs are really useful on most occasions. The only thing is when you pop a stem into the Oasis and you push water out, if it's a foam base, the water's actually got nowhere to go except down onto the table or the surface that you're working on. With the plastic base, there is a little bit of an opportunity for the water to collect in the little reservoir of plastic. It also holds in the water a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to use 4 different types of foliage. I'm using Acacia, Denis, Boden. I'm using Eucalyptus Populus with berry. I'm using Pinus Strobus. And this is a really nice Christmassy foliage. It's very delicate, very light, so it acts as a really good contrast for the leaves of the eucalyptus and a nice colour change as well. I'm also using Eucalyptus Cinerea. So that's 1, 2, 3, that's my 4 foliage. Also, just to give that rustic feel, I'm going to use some Pheasant Feathers and some Pussy Willow. So I've soaked my ring. This is actually a 14-inch wreath ring that I'm using here. We do sell them in every size from 8-inch right up to 26, I think it is 28. So, but this is a 14. I'm going to start by putting the Pinus Strobus in first. I'm just going to clear my wires out of the way. I'm just cutting tiny little pieces of the foliage off to start with. And then I'm going to start in a spiral formation. So as you can see, building up into that spiral form. I'm going to start with the Pinus to give the background. And I'm going in at an angle, so you've got that slight curve going all the way around the wreath. I'm going to do the inside of the wreath as well. So for those of you who can't see, you can see how we're starting to form that. So continue all the way around. So continuing all the way around the wreath. The Pinus Strobus comes in large bundles. I would say there's sufficient in one bundle of Pinus to probably complete 10 wreaths, I would say. So it's quite an economical foliage to buy. So winding our way all the way around. Oops, just lost my feathers. So you can see how we're starting to build that up, inside and the outside. Cutting more of the Pinus. Obviously, the more or the larger the wreath ring you use, the more foliage you'll use. So you might need to adjust that accordingly if you're going to use a slightly smaller wreath. Incidentally, I do have a bin there. I'm not just chucking stuff on the floor. Now you can, once you've made it up, as I said, because there's a plastic base, it is quite easy to water. So would suggest though that you move it to somewhere suitable, like a draining board, before you water it. Give it a good old soak and then allow it to drain before you replace it.
We've got Terry asking a question. He says, how long will this foliage last?
Okay, so I would anticipate that the Pinus would last until Christmas, providing the ring is kept well watered and it's not put somewhere really, really hot. The problem you're going to have really is with the eucalyptus. The eucalyptus is not as long lasting. So if you're using eucalyptus, I would anticipate that will probably last about 10 days to a fortnight, especially if it's in a slightly warm domestic environment. If you want something that's a bit longer lasting, you still want a grey colour tone, I'd probably go for the Nobilis. the blue spruce. That's very long lasting, and that will last as long as the Pinus does. Right, so we've completed the outside and the inside ring with the Pinus. I'm now going to add some little bits throughout the wreath, just to keep that theme going all the way through, so it doesn't look odd that you've just literally got an inside and an outside ring of the Pinus. Okay, so now I'm going to add some of the eucalyptus. This is Eucalyptus Cinerea. I'm just cutting some little pieces off that just to pop in. Okay, so now I'm just starting to add in some of the Eucalyptus Cinerea, just occasionally. As I say, this isn't one of the most long-lasting foliage, but it's quite hard to beat it for colour tone and for fragrance, really. Very, very popular with weddings, has that vintage appearance. Nothing else quite has that grey-blue tone. So always make sure when you're placing foliage into the Oasis that all of the leaves are stripped that are actually going to go into the wet part of the Oasis. That's simply because the leaves will deteriorate more quickly than the stem, and that's what encourages the bugs to start, and that's what will kill your flowers off most quickly. So as you can see, we've just popped that Eucalyptus Cinerea in, and already you can see what a difference in texture and colour just adding that one extra foliage has made. Now I'm going to use the Populus. Now Populus is really lovely at the moment because it's got that beautiful berry to it. Sometimes it comes to us and it has a slightly burgundy stem and a burgundy berry, so that's really appropriate for a Christmas time of year. Again, the berries give a lovely added texture to the wreath. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make sure that the berries are actually equally spaced, just so we get a good balance. Now you can buy all of these foliages, all of these types of foliage, you can buy dyed, especially the eucalyptus varieties. They come in all sorts of colours on our website. You can get gold and silver, bronze, and then your traditional reds, etc. So quite appropriate for Christmas arrangements. So that's the Populus going in. Now some of this Populus doesn't have the berry. I'm still going to use it, and I'm going to use it on the outsides of the wreath. Oops, I can find my piece of Oasis. There we go. Bear in mind, if you're doing something like this for a table, you can imagine people sitting looking at this angle. This is the view that they're going to get. So you need to make sure that the foliage comes right the way down to the base of the ring, so nobody gets to see that plastic backing. And I'm now going to use my Acacia, Denis Boden. Now, this is an absolutely lovely foliage. You might know it as a mimosa. It's obviously not in flower at the moment, but again it has that lovely texture and the lovely little flower berries, or flower buds actually on this occasion. There we go, so there we have all of the foliage in place. Now you can now add, if you want to, fruits, nuts, berries, pine cones, anything you fancy really. I'm actually going to do something slightly alternative. I'm going to use some pussy willow and some pheasant feathers. This is quite ironic for me because I'm actually not a massive fan of birds. So this is actually quite good for me. So what I'm doing is I'm going to place the feather into the Oasis at a slight curve, And then I'm going to do a single leg mount with a wire on the other end, and then bring that back into the wreath. So you have a slight curve. So then I'm now going to add in some pussy willow. Exactly the same principle as we've done with the pheasant feathers, and exactly the same wiring technique, single leg mount, bending the wire back on itself and then popping into the ring. So you can already see that the foliage highlights the pheasant feathers and the pussy willow. Bending it back. That will actually go into the oasis itself without wiring on that occasion. Okay, so added the rest of that pussy willow into the wreath. So now you can see how we've got the curves of feather and pussy willow all the way around. The shape adds as a nice foil for the fluffiness of the foliage. And just to finish that off, I'm going to use what we call a rustic Christmas ribbon. Now these rustic Christmas ribbons are available on our website. They are absolutely beautiful, have the bonus of being wired. So any of you who are not overly confident in making a bow, then they work beautifully. They keep their shape. These are available in this natural Hessian. They're also in red and green, and I think they're $5.25 plus VAT. So the bow that I'm going to create is what we call a figure 8 bow. So you start with the ribbon between your thumb and your first finger, crease it, fold it round behind yourself, scrunch it again, twist it and fold it. Hence why we get the figure 8. And then just keep repeating that until you've achieved a bow that's the shape you're after. I'm going to stop there. Literally hold it in your hands and then bind a wire right round the middle to hold it all together. Twist the wire at the back and then cut the excess ribbon. And there you have your figure 8 bow. Place that in. Sorry. And I'm going to weave some of the loops underneath that little piece of pussy willow, so it looks like it's an integral part of the design. There we go. And what you can do, if you want to, is add a couple of trails. And then just bind those with wire.
So you've simply folded
just simply folded it and then just done a double leg mount with the wire. Again, bend it back on itself so it sticks into the oasis happily, and then just pop that into the wet ring. And there you have your alternative Christmas wreath.